I've just popped out to the tea garden right now because everything is blooming and it's the perfect opportunity for me to show you 5 of my favorite tea garden plants that are blooming right now and talk to you a little bit about what they're used for and the easiest ways to grow them. I have a lot of videos about the tea garden on my channel because it's one of my favorite things to do and grow in the garden. I mean, that's kind of what's so great about gardening in general is there's so many different ways to do it. You can be a flower gardener, a vegetable gardener, a tea gardener, or you can just do container gardens and do annual plant arrangements, or you could do all of those things. And I tend to kind of experiment with all of those things here and there. The tea garden is by far my favorite because it's just become a really great grounding ritual, a way to connect with nature that also taps into my craftier side because I can dry the flowers out, make them into decorations, brew them into teas. And it's also the lowest maintenance garden that I grow. Like, I just throw all of this stuff in the early spring. I never have to replant. I don't do successions. I never fertilize. I barely water these gardens, honestly. There's a lot of stuff in here that's native or perennial that will just continue to come back and get bigger and better every year. And it's just really beautiful and attracts a lot of bugs to the garden by adding that diversity. So there's many plants in here that we're not going to cover today, but I do have a full list of every plant that you can grow in a tea garden that I will link for you down in the description. For today, we're going to start off with one of my favorites, which is probably the most common popular one we'll talk about today, and that's Calendula. She's just a beautiful sunshiny flower. I love her so much. She's a perfect beginner flower. If you're getting into herbalism and you're maybe a little bit nervous about what plants are safe and which ones are not, Calendula is a very, very safe, easy one to start with. I usually will dry it out and then infuse it into an oil. I do have a recipe for that listed on my Substack if you want to check it out down in the description below. And then with the oil, you can do all sorts of things with it. You can cook with it, you can just use the oil straight as a skin product, or you can combine it into a salve with some beeswax and other things like that to solidify it. So it's really just an incredibly useful plant that is also super easy to grow. It's self-seeding, so even though it's an annual, it's going to kind of go to seed on its own with these little seed pods and spread everywhere and come back again on its own next year. So you really only have to plant it once. I typically plant a Pacific Beauty blend, but if you're planting it solely for medicinal purposes, the Resina variety is going to be the most potent. It has the most of that resinous compound in it that is medicinal in calendula plants. All of these are growing in full sun, like 6 to 8 hours of sun a day, and they're all thriving. The more you cut back calendula, the more calendula you will get. So I am always constantly deadheading this and bringing it inside and drying it. I don't typically dry it in a dehydrator. I just put it on a bamboo rack and let it air dry, and it dries out pretty fast that way. But when you're picking the calendula to dry it for medicinal purposes, it's better for the plant to not be fully open. So we want the buds to have just opened or not be fully opened yet at all, because they just have the highest concentration of the medicinal compounds at that point. You can pick them at any point and it's fine as long as they haven't actually gone to seed. But if you're looking for those medicinal compounds, they're going to be the strongest when the flower is first starting to open. Calendula is really good in general for skin ailments in particular, and it's also just delicious. So you can put the petals, just pluck off the petals and use them as a garnish on your dishes or inside of a salad, and they have a really nice bright flavor that I really enjoy. A lot of the plants in the tea garden have great purposes and are beautiful, but even though they're edible, they don't taste very good. Calendula is one of the ones I would say actually does taste good. They typically come in either yellow, orange, or I really want to get the strawberry blonde ones next year because I think those are so beautiful. The next plant I want to talk to you about today is hibiscus. And I'm always told whenever I mention that you can use hibiscus in tea that I'm wrong and I must mean roselle. Roselle is something different. It is edible and it is primarily used for tea, but hibiscus is used for tea in many cultures as well. And what's really cool about hibiscus tea is it's usually color changing. So once you brew it, if you add a little bit of acidity with lemon juice, it will change that color. So it's a really fun like little magic trick you can do with your kids too. Now there's tons of different varieties of hibiscus. I typically just grab whatever from the nursery, and I don't know what type it is. So while hibiscus is all edible, there's no firm proof that every single hybrid is because there's just so many of them. So it's kind of a use at your own risk thing if you don't know the exact variety. I will probably be replacing this with a perennial hibiscus next year because I just get so sad having to rip it out every year because they don't overwinter here in my climate. But they're just so beautiful, and they really do take care of themselves. The only thing is I do think it's kind of like a high water need plant compared to most of the other things that I grow in the garden. So I have noticed that in the heat of summer, if we haven't gotten a lot of rain, a lot of the buds will just die off, and I won't get flowers for a period of time. But after things calm down, cool down, and get a little bit wetter, it will always come and bounce back. I will never not have hibiscus in my garden. I just think it's such a stunning plant. This is another one that genuinely tastes good if you brew it as a tea, or honestly, I think this would make an amazing cake topper too. Hibiscus may help to lower blood pressure, help with a sore throat, and any digestive issues. It's just a really easy to grow, beautiful plant. They can get pretty big too. The next plant in my tea garden is one you're probably getting sick of hearing me talk about because I'm so obsessed with the way that it smells. This is lemon verbena. It's actually a shrub and it flowers, but oftentimes in our climate we don't see the flowers until very late in the year because it only grows here as an annual unless you bring it inside over the winter. Lemon verbena has been used medicinally, and it really does live up to the name. Even just me lightly touching this, it's releasing this amazing smell. I wish you could just scratch and sniff your screen right now because it's unreal. So it has always been used for potpourri and making natural perfumes, but it's also really great for digestive issues, fevers, and anxiety. I've considered trying to grow my lemon verbena in a container and bringing it indoors in the winter. It's also really easy to propagate, so I may take some cuttings from this because that's another great way to get more of these plants. Loves full sun, well-draining soil, but it will do okay in a container as well. It just won't get as big. If you plant this in the ground, it's going to get enormous, like several feet. Lemon verbena doesn't like to be overwatered. It is prone to root rot, so it's important not to overwater these. And I also have found it's really important to keep on top of regular pruning in order to allow it to get really nice and bushy. Otherwise, it can get kind of woody and leggy and bare at the bottom of the plant. So keeping on top of pruning, I pruned it about a month after I planted it, and I'm pruning it about once a month since then because it is a pretty fast grower. And I've never fertilized this. I have read it could benefit from being fertilized about once a month, but I've never had any issues where I felt like it really needed it. Next, we actually have one of my favorite cut flowers to grow that also just so happens to be edible, although it is one of those edible flowers that doesn't taste particularly good. It has a really unique, interesting history. So these are snapdragons, and the reason that they're called snapdragons is because when you squeeze the sides, it's like a little jaw opening and closing. It looks like the mouth of a dragon. The name snapdragon actually comes from Greek and Roman mythology because these flowers were believed to have magical powers. They were often grown in gardens to ward off evil spirits. Now, when I grow snapdragons, they are one of those plants that prefers the cooler temperatures, and I found them to be a really good candidate for cold stratification in milk jugs. So you could do winter sowing. So I just cut a milk jug in half, fill that up with some soil, and then sprinkle in a ton of snapdragon seeds very close together and let them germinate even when there's still snow on the ground. And then by the time it's time to put these in the ground in early spring, you can easily divide them up. They're very tolerant of that. Their roots are not super delicate, and put them in the ground. So they typically will flower once early on in the season, and then it will get too hot for them and they kind of die back a little bit. But come fall, you will notice that they do kind of bounce back and put out a second flush of those flowers. And the more that you cut them back, the bushier they'll get and the more blooms you'll get. This is the Rembrandt variety, and it's a shorter variety, kind of like a medium height, and I really like that height. But snapdragons come in all different height ranges. Like there are some that are 2 or 3 feet tall, and those might benefit from some trellising because they can kind of flop over, but they're a really great one. Like I've seen people even just like mow them down with a weed whacker when they want to start over, and they'll bounce back. So they are an annual, but they do tend to self-seed pretty easily. And then back here, hidden in among my calendula, we have a native perennial that I think should be in every garden because it is just so beautiful and so low maintenance, and the native bugs love it. I can see we've got some tiny little native bees enjoying them right now. This is called blanket flower, and it's called that because the petals are said to kind of resemble a blanket or a quilt, but it's been used in indigenous cultures forever at this point medicinally to treat skin inflammation, digestive issues, and fevers. Now primarily for the medicinal purposes, you're looking for the roots of this plant, but the flowers are also edible too, and it just so happens to be a really low maintenance plant because it's perennial, it's naturalized to this environment, it really doesn't need much at all in terms of watering and fertilization. I typically grab blanket flower as a start from the nursery, but you can definitely start it from seed as well. And deadheading will definitely help it to set out a lot of new blooms. With any kind of native perennial that I'm putting in the early spring, I like to water it really regularly up front. And then once it's established, it's usually pretty good. It doesn't need a whole lot of babying. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments what your favorite plants to grow are for tea. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.